Confidence on Wall Street taking repeated gut punches over the last weeks with coronavirus-driven sell-offs and rallies in the stock market and the oil price war. Saudi Arabia launched this weekend. Joining us right now is Ian Bremmer, the president and founder of Eurasia Group. And Ian, you got lots to study that's been going on. Things are changing pretty rapidly. How do you let's just start with the oil fight that's taking place between Saudi Arabia and Russia. How does that change things?
Well, I mean, obviously it is a serious problem for a lot of countries around the world that were already taking on the chin and that rely on oil production and export. So, I mean, a country like Mexico, whose growth has been seriously underperforming recently. Lopez Obrador, his popularity that had been very strong for a year, now sinking. A lot of demonstrations, a lot of violence, a lot of security problems, and now they're going to seriously underperform. What are they going to do as a consequence of that? We see with Ecuador, we see with a number of the sub-Saharan countries. I mean, this is not the best. And also, you know, Putin just yesterday coming out and saying, actually, I'd like to go for another 2 terms. The timing of that, I mean, we knew he was going to change the Constitution. The timing clearly is on the back of he understands that Russia's economy is heading absolutely nowhere good. Both the Russians and the Saudis are kind of expecting this price war is going to last for a while.
Yeah, who's got the upper hand?
The Russians do.
Yeah, we've heard different, depending on who I talk to, we've heard different things on this. With the Saudi Arabians having so much oil and being able to withstand it longer, why do you think Russians have the upper hand?
Well, number one, because there's a lot more control in terms of governance of Putin in Russia compared to the difficulties of Mohammed bin Salman.
Really? He just like throws people and locks them up when he doesn't like what they're saying?
Well, yeah, but there are a lot more that he has to lock up. Putin doesn't have to, right? I mean, the fact that he is engaging in serious domestic transformation against a very conservative group of elites, it's just harder for him to pull that off. But at the same time, let's keep in mind that the Saudis balance their budget about $84. In Russia, it's more like 40. It's also a much larger piece of the Saudi economy than it is for Russia. So you put that all together, I feel like the Russians can outlast if they need to.
Okay, public policy question for you.
Sure.
We've been talking about bailouts all morning.
Yeah.
The Trump administration considering bailing out frackers.
Yep.
Shale. Does that make sense? I had made the argument before that a lot of these guys were highly leveraged and there may be private money on the sides that could come in potentially. But at the same time, there is arguably a public policy question about whether you want to have a strong shale industry relative to all these other things that are going on around the world.
I think it's very relevant to have a strong shale industry in the United States.
So you'd prop them up.
But, well, having said that, it's so much more decentralized in terms of oil production than it was the last time we had a serious oil war beginning in the 80s, where you went from 7 super majors down to 3, right? So, I mean, I think the ability of the Americans to snap back when oil prices eventually move is going to be much greater. And if there's some consolidation in the space, I think that's okay. I also think that the fact that the Republicans and the Democrats want such different kinds of stimulus in an environment where everyone's worried about the U.S. economy just means the size of the stimulus is going to be bigger because everyone's going to get what they want. That's how you get this through in an election period. That should be market positive.
Okay, let's go back to how we are kind of watching this play out. And you're following pretty closely what's happened in Russia, in South Korea, in Italy. How do you think the different types of approaches that we've seen there eventually kind of make their way here, or do they?
Yeah, well, of course they do, because, I mean, you already see the Trump administration putting the scientists up front in a way that a couple of weeks ago they weren't. I mean, you had people saying, oh, my God, are they going to muzzle Dr. Fauci? They're not going to muzzle Dr. Fauci, right?
He's been pretty clear about what he thinks, even as recently as yesterday.
And no question last night. And I mean, that's not a good message for the Trump administration, the American economy, but that doesn't stop them from getting it out. I think that's important. But very different in terms of the American ability to roll out testing very quickly. We're still lagging very dramatically behind. I have no doubt the private sector is now taking that seriously and the American government is pushing it, but it still is going to make it harder for us. Right now,
more bad news before we get good news.
I think that's right. And right now, a couple of things I would point to. First, there's a huge difference between the Italians, the French, and the Brits, right? I mean, the Italians, they got it wrong early, and now they are maximal response, a lockdown that we've never seen in that country, and obviously going to have a big impact on their economy. Right. The French government pushing really hard for EU stimulus. It's going to be hard to get together, while at home, Macron's doing very little indeed. And the danger for France, if this really expands, is a hell of a lot greater. While in the UK, you know, you've got fiscal policy and monetary policy coming together. You have Boris Johnson with the scientists around him, a much stronger approach, stronger push on borders too. He's actually looking pretty pretty good right now. And if you ask me where Trump is compared to Macron versus Boris Johnson, he's closer to the Macron camp, not necessarily where you want the American leadership to be.
One thing you've said is that, fiscal stimulus will come together. Both sides will kind of get everything. You'll have a much bigger package. I don't think that happens quickly. And maybe that's part of the reason you see the markets indicated down almost 900 points right now. The fiscal stuff takes longer to work out.
Yeah, it's probably May when Congress comes back and, when you have other pieces of legislation on health care, for example, that have to come through.
That's a long time when you're looking at how quickly the situation's changing on the ground.
Fair enough, especially because not only are we about to see American numbers get much larger, but also because, if you have stuff coming on boats from China, right, it's 6 weeks.
Right.
So, we see a lot of photos on social media, people saying, oh my God, there's no toothpaste. A lot of that isn't because it's panic buying. A lot of that is because you're starting to see the impact of the supply chains play out in the United States.
If we extended unemployment insurance right now to 99 weeks, which is what I think we did before.
During the financial crisis.
During the financial crisis. How do you think that would change the dynamic?
I certainly hope that the orientation of our stimulus is going to be towards things that will affect individual workers, especially those that are worried about having to come into work, irrespective of whether they're sick or not.
That
to me is,
sick leave seems like an obvious, and it sounds like President Trump has even said that both sides of the aisle probably get on board with that.
And a number of companies are already moving in that direction themselves before they have to.
Which is good news, too. Yeah, who did we just hear? Walmart just said that after they had a confirmed case in Tennessee.
And there have been some of the fast food companies and others. One other point I would raise, China. We do see a lot of Chinese companies restarting. A lot of those I would call Potemkin companies. In other words, they want to show that they're making the numbers, but they're not really actually getting restarted. Instead, they're just turning on the electricity. They're just having trucks move around, but they aren't actually filled. Countries like China, the former Soviet Union, they're very good domestically at having their leaders meet orders when they have to. So if an order comes down from the top and says you've got to hit these numbers, and you know that you can't because you don't have the workers and you can't afford another outbreak because it's your head and your family's head, you'll find a way to meet the numbers. We should not expect the Chinese economy to rebound as quickly as the government is presently saying.
Well, how will we know when it's real? What should we be watching?
We're going to get a lot of anecdotal information. Social media in China is robust. People are getting, I talk to a hell of a lot of Chinese on the ground. I'm sure you all do too. It's really important to have your ears in China because, look, there's a lot of anger right now. In Wuhan, you hear the Chinese government say we should be expressing gratitude to the Chinese Communist Party. Internationally, there's a lot of appreciation that China is taking really hard measures. Domestically, it's really mixed. And the fact that it's mixed means we're getting a lot better information from the average citizen.
Because...
Do you believe the numbers in China, by the way?
No, I don't.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm sorry, just mixed because they're angry at how severe those reactions were, or because they felt they weren't taken care of?
And because they don't believe their leaders. Because they think their leaders take care of themselves and aren't taking care of them, because they think there's indifference to the plight of the average Chinese, and because they don't trust a lot of what comes out of the Chinese government. Yeah.
So when we say that they're getting back to work and things are going along and they're coming out the other side, are we not really seeing the whole picture?
We should be much more cautious. I think that the Chinese government is so concerned about the potential of an additional outbreak. And frankly, rightly so, there's going to be a lot more slowness in getting the Chinese economy really back running. Not only, making the orders work across the board, but also getting the migrant labor back, having the kinds of mechanisms you need in place to ensure that they're actually they can't just go to everyone in an apartment block and say, send in voluntarily your temperature every day, which is what they have been doing in some cases. Like, people just check the box, right? So there's a lot of that going on in China. You can make numbers for whatever you want. Actually turning the system around is a different story.
Ian, thank you.
Good to see you guys. Sure.
Because see the market at this point, Dow down 885 points.